Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Henry George Daily Devotional. Sorry that this is coming out a day late. I was helping a friend move 9 to 5, and then when I got home, I just didn't feel like it. Happens. But I'm making up for it with this weekend edition, and it will never, ever, ever happen again, I promise. All right, we left off in chapter 3, which was something like law about wages, wages not drawn from capital, produced by labor, which I swear we've already covered 100 times, but Henry George thinks this is very important. We were going through examples of laborers getting their wages. And so now we'll continue. I dwell on this obvious fact that labor always precedes wages because it is all important to an understanding of the more complicated phenomena of wages that it should be kept in mind. Okay. And obvious as it is, as I have put it, the plausibility of the proposition that wages are drawn from capital, a proposition that is made the basis for such important and far-reaching deductions, comes in the first instance from a statement that ignores and leads the attention away from this truth. That statement is that labor cannot exert its productive power unless supplied by capital with maintenance. So that is a statement that we must be very wary of and we don't like. And it is footnoted as here it comes from John Stuart Mill. Okay, so John Stuart Mill says, industry is limited by capital. There can be no more industry than is supplied with materials to work up and food to eat. Self-evident as the thing is. I love it. Everyone says everything's self-evident. Stuart Mill continues, it is often forgotten that the people of a country are maintained and have their wants supplied not by the produce of present labor, but of past. They consume what has been produced, not what is about to be produced. Now, of what has been produced, a part only is allotted to the support of productive labor, and there will not and cannot be more of that labor than the portion so allotted, which is the capital of the country, can feed and produce with the materials and instruments of production. That's from John Stuart Mill, Principles of Political Economy, Book 1, Chapter 5, Section 1. And it is not what Henry George likes. And can you guess why? Is it because we're calling capital the thing which is being used to satisfy the desires of individual people, their desires being to eat and to wear clothing and to have shelter? That would be a use of wealth that is not devoted to the production of more wealth, so that wealth could not really be considered capital. Let's see what George says. George continues, the unwary reader at once recognizes the fact that the laborer must have food, clothing, etc. in order to enable him to perform the work. Well, I don't know about every reader is going to realize that, but let's see what else the unwary reader thinks. The unwary reader also thinks, and having been told that the food, clothing, etc. used by productive laborers are capital, that's what the unwary reader, where he makes his mistake. He's told that his food, clothing is capital. So then he assents to the conclusion that the consumption of capital is necessary to the application of labor, and from this it is but an obvious deduction that industry is limited by capital. Yes, this is the sequence that leads us to bad thinking. And George is clearing it up for us. And he's going to rephrase this. So they come to this obvious deduction that industry is limited by capital from the errant idea that they're consuming capital in their maintenance, and that the demand for labor depends upon the supply of capital, and hence that wages depend upon the ratio between the number of laborers looking for employment and the amount of capital devoted to hiring them. Now, George continues. But I think the discussion in the previous chapter will enable anyone to see wherein lies the fallacy of this reasoning, a fallacy which has entangled some of the most acute minds in a web of their own spinning. Yeah, so if you've fallen for this, you have a pretty acute mind. But if you didn't fall for this, we don't know what kind of mind you have. It is in the use of the term capital in two senses. In the primary proposition that capital is necessary to the exertion of productive labor, The term, quote, capital is understood as including all food, clothing, shelter, etc. Whereas in the deductions finally drawn from it, the term is used in its common and legitimate meaning of wealth devoted, not to the immediate gratification of desire, but to the procurement of more wealth. Yes. The first definition is its not legitimate meaning, and its not legitimate meaning is to think that it includes food and shelter and clothing. Of wealth in the, yes, but and its legitimate meaning not to the immediate gratification, but to the procurement of more wealth, of wealth in the hands of employers as distinguished from laborers. The conclusion is no more valid than it would be from the acceptance of the proposition that a laborer cannot go to work without his breakfast and some clothes, to infer that no more laborers can go to work than employers first furnish with breakfast and clothes. Now, the fact is that laborers generally furnish their own breakfasts and the clothes in which they go to work. And the further fact is that capital, in the sense in which the word is used in distinction to labor, and the further fact is that capital, and there's the parenthetical, in exceptional cases sometimes may, but is never compelled to make advances to labor before the work begins. Yes, and this is something I've gotten hung up on. When you receive an advance on your wage, you very often spend that on your rent, food, and so it feels like that those that that ad- and in a very technical sense, that advancement is coming from stored up capital. And it's like, in that situation, the only way an employer can give an advancement on wages is if they have stored up capital. So this is like this awkward bit, but as George just said, this is only exceptional cases, or an employer may but is never compelled to do this. And I think again of my little video game design, our video game studio getting funding from a publisher. It's essentially the publisher's saying, here's food and shelter for 6 months or a year, and you'll then produce a thing. Although the publishers don't just give it all in one lump sum. They want, and in fact, they wait until you have actually produced something valuable, like a demo or a prototype, and then they're sort of paying you after you've done that labor. Well, I mean, they are. It's super rare that you can just be like, hey, publisher, give me money just to do whatever I want. I don't know. All right, yeah, this is enough of my thoughts. Let's go back to George. Of all the vast number of unemployed laborers in the civilized world today, there is probably not a single one willing to work who could not be employed without any advance of wages. Okay, got some good negatives there. So that means that there are plenty of work, that all the workers will work if they don't even get an advancement of wages. Pretty much. And that's, pretty much true to my experience. Everyone's going to, you work and then you get paid. All right, a great proportion of workers would doubtlessly gladly go to work on terms which did not require the payment of wages before the end of a month. Yep, get paid monthly. All right, and now we go. It is doubtful if there are enough to be called a class of workers who would not go to work and wait for their wages until the end of the week, as most laborers habitually do. Yeah, there's probably very few people who are not willing to work and wait a week to be paid. And there are certainly none who wouldn't be willing to wait, who would not wait for their wages until the end of the day or until the next meal hour. Yeah, it's crazy to think of anyone who like says I want to be paid after every time I, pound in a nail. If you're going to pay me to build a house, you got to pay me. Anyway, the precise time of the payment of wages is immaterial. That's very important. An advancement or before the work is done sometimes happens. Usually it's after the work, but the precise time of the payment of wages is immaterial. The essential point, the point I lay stress on, is that it is after the performance work. Okay, George, wait a minute. It is this word after should just be replaced with for the performance of work because you just gave examples of it being an advancement. In those cases, it is not technically after the performance of work. I was about to say yes, this is it, but now I'm a little bit annoyed. Okay, I'm going really slowly today. That finishes. That's kind of an annoying place to stop. But the precise time of payment of wages is immaterial, and then he immediately says the point is a time-based. Th- this should just be for the performance of work, not after the performance of work. I don't know. Post in the comments. Am I wrong? Is George wrong? I don't know. See ya.